So, Paul, what an amazing space. I mean, this must be a dream come true.
It is, yes. Yes, absolutely. I can't believe it. I'm still come in here every morning and think, oh my God, this is bizarre.
Because you did a thing on my channel about like your history in studios, and you've basically had a lot of them, haven't you?
Yes, I don't know whether I've moved. I have moved around quite a lot, I guess. We had one really big move in the middle, which was we moved to LA for about. We were there for just under 2 years. I had a kind of converted garage, which was at that point was the biggest room that I'd set up. And then obviously when we moved back from LA, we moved into Tileyard, Spitfire, and we had our rooms set up opposite each other. That was great setting. But I feel like, I've kind of, from kind of tiny rooms, sort of spare bedrooms and things like that, up to, there tended to be things like converted garages or things like that, where it's a kind of bigger room, but it's just a box. I've gone through lots of iterations of kind of setup and trying to get the ergonomics right, but also trying to get the sound of a room right. And then having, really small children in succession has meant a lot of working on headphones, over the years as well. So I've kind of learnt to do that as well. But this is the first time where I feel like I've got the room set up so that it's really ergonomic for me, but also the sound, back here is it's not completely dead, but it's drier back here, so that it's easy to hear what's going on in the mix from the speakers. And then at the other side of the room, it's a little bit more live, a bit further away from the treatment over here, but it gets a little bit more live over there. So for recording, instruments, it's a good
Right.
place to pop them.
It feels to me like it felt the first time I went into British Grove, and you just go, this is someone who's been in a lot of, or has had a lot of studios. And it's like, it's all the boxes are ticked, the natural light and all of that kind of stuff. So people kind of have a potted idea from various YouTube stuff that you've done, but it'd be just great to go back to the beginning. And, I believe you were a chorister at first? Yes,
in Worcester Cathedral Choir. So from the age of 9, I think, I'd played the piano since I was about 6 years old and always sang in kind of choirs and stuff like that. But being in that kind of environment was really intensive musical education. So we basically, I think I worked it out the other day. I think I probably was singing for about 2 hours on average a day.
Wow.
And that was, morning rehearsal, there'd be an afternoon rehearsal, evensong. Saturday we had a long morning rehearsal and then another, I think probably 2 hours of rehearsal on a Saturday, plus a service in the evening. And then Sunday, again, probably 1 hour and 3/4 of rehearsal across the two, but then a morning service and an evening service. And we were singing everything from Palestrina to Jean Langlais and Messiaen and stuff like that. I mean, it was intense, but I learnt, a huge amount about different types of music. Not so much from a kind of academic standpoint of, I think it's called Schenkerian analysis or something like that. Right. Not doing all that kind of stuff with the boxes and analysing the chords, but kind of, by osmosis, by actually singing this stuff and performing. And, I started, when I was a chorister, I started playing the organ as well. So I got some experience. I was allowed to play for services sometimes. And then, when I was a teenager, I earned money, by playing the organ every week in a little church in Worcestershire where I grew up. So there was always lots and lots of practical music making going on.
Right. But you didn't go to music college, did you?
I did pick my A-levels, and I picked double maths and physics. So that kind of, when I then started looking at music, it was quite interesting because I was the thicko in my double maths set had 5 people in it basically, 4 of whom were just genius level, and then there was me. It was interesting because I was just about good enough to be able to do it, but we definitely kind of, scratching my head more than anyone else in class. When I started then looking around universities and colleges and things and kind of trying to work out if I could get in to study music, because I was really, going in that direction at that stage. Most places said, well, you don't have music A-level, so it's a straight no. There was a negotiable. If I'd applied to Cambridge and got an organ scholarship at one of the colleges, they would have let me study whatever I wanted to, so that would have been a possibility. But I just wasn't quite good enough an organist. I'd done my grade 8, but I thought I'm going to be practicing for kind of...
Grade 8 in organ?
Yes.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. So that was great. Organ is like a kind of mind-bending exercise in logistics at the same time as trying to be a musician. So you've got, the organ that I grew up playing in Worcester Cathedral, you had different boxes in different kind of locations around the cathedral. So you would know that, the pedals sounded slightly later than the manuals. And then the solo manual, which had the really punchy brass in, was actually round by the pedal box. So that sounded kind of at similar time to the pedals, but that again behind the manuals. So you're having to play everything slightly, one limb would be playing slightly ahead of the beat, and then everything ahead of, what you were actually hearing coming back. So it's quite hard to not just slow down the more you kind of play. Right. Gradually grind to a halt because everything's coming back slightly late. So there was that was good fun. But I knew that to be able to play at that level, I was going to basically spend the next 3 years kind of practicing 6-7 hours a day, and I just couldn't see a way of making that work with being able to do any kind of meaningful study. And I just thought this is not going to work. So I decided in the end to look at scientific stuff, and I did aeronautical engineering at Bristol, which was the other thing that I was really interested in. And then I managed to get in with the music department at Bristol while I was there, and they recommended a fantastic piano teacher to me in my first year, who was Chris Northam, who was just a stunningly good player and slightly rebellious. So he kind of was the perfect teacher for me. So I kind of privately carried on my piano study. And then they let me do, in my third year, they let me do one of my 4 options, one of my kind of, supposed engineering selections. They let me do that in the music department. So I did composition and performance, which was great. So I learnt, a fair amount. Then there wasn't any real kind of formalised study because I was outside of the music department. It wasn't reharmonising like a Bach chorale or, trying to write a fugue or anything like that. They'd gone past that by the time I joined on. It was just, write some music and then to give a recital.
I imagine there is a love affair with technology somewhere, emerged somewhere along the lines.
Yeah.
When did that emerge?
I saved up for little kind of, bits of stuff when I was a teenager.
Come on, first synth?
So my first synth was the Korg M1. But my first sound unit was a Roland.
You were later to it than I was then, because the M1 was...
That was 1990s.
Okay, right,
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first time I actually had an actual synth. But I had before that a Roland Sound Canvas. Okay. And a very, very old second-hand Atari ST. With those 2 things,
running
I could make...
Cubase or...?
I think it was Notator.
Notator, right,
yeah.
Which became Logic.
Yeah. And then before that, when I was kind of a younger teenager, it was around about the time when the VIC-20 came out, Commodore VIC-20. So I had a very basic music sequencer on that.
Right. You used to get, did you, for the VIC-20, did you get magazines where you programmed in the envelopes?
Yeah. In fact, before I had it, sounds really sad and nerdy. Before I had it, I had a kind of gatefold promotional piece of paper, which had a life-size picture of the computer keyboard on it. And I used to write programs in BASIC in a pad, and I used to sit and actually pretend that I had the computer.
Wow, that's brilliant.
So really sad. Yeah.
So you left college and then you didn't go into aeronautical engineering as a thing?
No, I really had properly realised by then that I wanted to be in music. So what I did was I got onto a course in Bournemouth, which I think I was only the second year of the course running, which was a postgraduate diploma / MA in I think it was called Electroacoustic Music for Film and Television.
Okay.
So there were 8 places, and we each had a little workstation, and we had a Proteus 2, a Mac running Studio Vision. I think we had a basic sampler. It was something like a SO1, and that was it. And then you could bring along any other bits that you had. So I mean, I had my sound canvas, which I added into the mix. And the keyboard was a Corgo 1, which I loved. But that was a great course run by a guy called Professor Stephen Deutsch, and he took me on without a music degree. Everyone else had a music degree, so
That's incredible.
that was, which was great, because he basically just listened to the music that I'd been writing and said, okay,
well, that's what it's about, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that was great. That was an amazing opportunity to spend a year really, practicing, doing stuff. We had student directors on campus who were on the filmmaking course.
Right.
So, and there's an amazing animation course at the college that's right adjacent to Bournemouth University. So that was a fantastic year as well, and it enabled me to get my showreel together, VHS showreel. Wrote a couple of papers for the MA, and that all went well. And then that lasted a full year, and then after that I moved with some friends to London and just started tramping the streets of Soho trying to find work.
And your first place, was it at Mikasa?
Mikasa,
Did I meet your kind of...
Yes, my old
sensei.
boss. My sensei. Yeah, gave me my first job. Yeah, Mike at Mikasa was an absolutely lovely guy. Yeah. It was quite sort of mind-blowing for me the first few months being there. I couldn't work out, how he was making stuff sound so good. Mm-hmm. And we were working on tape, so there was a lot of skills I had to learn quite quickly. I had to learn how to, get the tape up and running.
This was ostensibly a jingles, a kind of advertising?
Yeah, it was all, it was music production company, jingles, TV themes. Mm-hmm. There was a mixture of things that had to sound like commercially available, Mm-hmm. Things like, I don't know if anyone, remembers the kind of Gillette ads from the 90s, with the kind of high screaming soul vocal. And the best a man can get, and Tommy Vance doing the voiceovers. I think the vocalist was Lance Ellington, I think, on a lot of that stuff. It was all very, very high production value, and I had to kind of really scramble to kind of get my chops up. Mm-hmm. And using stuff that there was no kind of clever computer equipment or anything like that. It was basically, I was sequencing on an Akai MPC 60, recording to 24 track. Through I think a Soundcraft desk or something like that. Right. It was a reasonably big desk, but it wasn't it wasn't a Neve or a SSL or anything like that. And then the kind of standard bits and bobs, the Yamaha Rev 7 I think was the reverb, one of those things.
Oh,
and then
yeah,
and then
those are the ones. Were they not the ones they put inside O2Rs?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, had a certain sound. It could do one thing very well.
Yeah. Grainy.
Grainy, metallic sound. Yeah, but it was a real kind of boot camp in that I was writing a different type of music every day.
Well, speed is something that I don't think on any of our channels is something we've necessarily talked about, but it's actually such a vital part of certainly early days of being a media composer when you're younger, and you're doing more stuff, and you maybe haven't found your niche, or as they say, niche in America, but that kind of thing of just having to really churn out really high quality stuff very, very quickly to brief. One
of the really important things to kind of grasp is that whatever it takes, you have to deliver. Mm-hmm. There's no, the dog ate my homework. It's, you basically, if you do that, that is really, really bad, and word spreads very quickly.
I've seen that happen to some quite successful composers, and suddenly it's a bit like, I need to get this right, and I think that they either learn or as you say, word gets out, and it gets a bit difficult. I worked, but I think in this day and age, particularly with kind of social media, is what people tend to do is go, oh, they worked with so and so on that. I know so and so I'll contact them. Yeah,
I think it's one of those things where you work out very, very quickly that kind of strategies. You can't spend ages fiddling around with something, basically. Yeah. You take an idea and you run with it. I think Hans said you you can't persuade somebody to like something that they don't like. So if if something has to be binned, it has to be binned. You have to start again. But ultimately, it's about not faffing around and get a good idea together as quickly as you can, and then run with it and right to the end. Because it's so easy to get halfway in and because it doesn't sound great yet, you kind of go, oh God, no, this is rubbish. It's not working, and lose all your confidence. Whereas you just have to keep going until it sounds right, until it sounds good.
So you worked for Mikasa, and then did you kind of break out on your own?
Yes, so I was lucky enough to get a place on the ASCAP film scoring workshop in '99. That was really amazing. I mean, it was 4 weeks of, kind of seminars and sessions with really great composers and arrangers and people in the business, over in LA. And then the culmination at the end was a scoring session where you had kind of 15 minutes of the session to record a cue that you'd written that was around about 3.5 minutes long. So my cue, I was given the chase from 101 Dalmatians, the live movie, which ends with the kind of fall into the fountain. So it's that kind of out of control, scampering along kind of thing. Again, a really amazing experience because it was conducting the orchestra as well, and really kind of throwing you in at the deep end. So that was amazing. And then I came back from that and basically then kind of branched out on my own and started doing all kinds of different things. I was still doing commercials, pitching for commercials, still doing TV work, and I did more drama work actually from that point onwards.
And there was a point where the advertising industry, kind of the arse fell out of it, really.
Yeah, so that was round about 2006. I remember that because I was still getting called. So there was a, if you get called in to pitch on something, then you would get a demo fee, and it was usually like 750 quid or something like that. And I'd been called in by this agency that I'd done quite a lot of work for to pitch on a Lexus Global TV campaign. They were usually quite honest, with what was happening. And so I knew that there was me and there was another music company pitching on it. Took the brief and started working on it. I think I had maybe a couple of weeks, a week and a half, something like that, to get some music together. And while I was working on it, I got called from 4 other companies.
Oh God.
So two via people that I knew, and 2 cold calls from people that I didn't even know, who just got my details out of one of the kind of directories, and saying that there was an open pitch for this Lexus Global TV campaign, and did I want to kind of chuck in some stuff for free? I just thought, this is not good. No. Something has changed here, and it was very, very quick.
Yes, I remember.
And suddenly, lots of those little companies suddenly sprung up where they were basically
taking huge chunks of the commission.
Yeah,
and
50% and up of both sides with no costs, because they were just going out to composers, getting, in some cases there must have been hundreds of pitches. I mean, I can't even imagine how the agency producers were sifting through all this stuff. From people all over the place, and everything and everyone working for nothing. Really bad for kind of established composers who already had their kind of client base and relied on demo fees if you didn't get the gig.
And it still is. That's how it is today. I notice that these production companies, if you want to call them that, they really come and go as well. I mean, they last for 2 or 3 years. They're hot, and then
that does seem to happen a lot. I mean, I've been out of that world for a while now, so there were loads that I kind of knew of, and I won't name any names, but there were loads of companies that seemed to be really well established companies that just don't exist anymore. I think it really kind of decimated that part of the industry, which is a real shame, because in those days you could have the creatives and the agency producer could come and sit in the studio. Once they decided, okay, they'd got a couple of companies, maybe each company had a couple of composers working on it. they would pick someone. They'd say, right, this person has got the closest. So we'll work with them to get it absolutely perfect. And they ended up with great stuff. And, there's some classic music from that era on commercials, really kind of long-lasting and well-known things. And you just lose that opportunity if it just turns into this, we've got 300 tracks, which one is kind of vaguely right.
Absolutely.
And
there isn't that kind of iterative, collaborative, evolving process.
Yeah.
I think that we kind of documented the beginning of Spitfire very well, but something, because you're very modest, we've never really talked about is it's had a profound effect on both of our careers as composers, but the effect was kind of more profound and sooner for you.
So we got to that point where we had both bought a certain library and we're just frustrated with trying to get stuff sounding good.
Particularly talking about that speed thing, because there were demos of that library that were amazing.
Yeah.
But someone would say, it took me 3 months to do a minute and a half. And you're like, it's not going to happen if I'm turning around a pitch.
That's not going to fly. So, and I think there were just a different ethos of, and for some things it worked great. For some things seemed to sound really good using that, but some things just didn't work at all. And I think we just had that kind of idea that we would do it differently. We would set up as if we were setting up for an actual scoring session, in the same room with the same engineer, same mics, same players, and then just record individual notes. And some things worked well and some things just didn't. And, there were too many compromises in some of the things. Like, you lost the attack of the sound a little bit. So we kind of forged a path that seemed to be giving the best results. And we recorded, we started with the chamber strings.
Mm-hmm.
That was the thing that we both really desperately needed. We had gathered around a few, a handful of people that you'd been working with. Mm-hmm. I think you'd done quite a lot of work with Anne Dudley, for example, but I'd also done something for her, some realisation stuff actually, for a film that she was working on.
Harry Gregson Williams, David Arnold was very early adopter, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And then
so we knew David from, or at least I knew David from him being around at Air.
Absolutely.
Just meeting him and chatting.
Yeah.
And John Powell.
Rupert Gregson Williams.
Yeah. So the kind of very early adopters just said, it sounds like a good idea. Off you go and get on with it. And so we developed a kind of, we kind of on the hoof worked out how the whole thing would work. Did a little experimental session one evening in Air, which was our kind of violin twos in case it went horribly wrong. And Cleo Gould was the leader of that section, and just incredible players, all of them incredible players. And we put that together as a proof of concept. At that stage, we were using Giga Studio hadn't hit the wall at that stage, and they had this new version 4, where they were doing a plugin called GVI4, and you could use that to build your own, dongle protected software. So we used that. I think Harry was the first person who actually had the patches. Dropped them off. He was working on Narnia, I think, wasn't he, at the hospital?
Yeah,
not literally at the hospital, but the club, the hospital
in London. Yeah,
I think you called him the day after we gave him the test patches, and he was already using it.
Yeah,
and he said, "Yeah, it's great. Where's the rest of it?" so we just thought, okay, that's going to work. That's great. And then we booked back in for a few more days to start capturing the rest of the stuff. At which point, I just seem to remember having a panic attack.
Yes. Well, I wasn't there. I'd recruited my younger brother Joe to kind of, because I was, heading a project, and he ran me up and said, there was a bit of a moment, and he advised that you go and walk around the block. He just saw this endless.
Yeah, it suddenly
it's like
became
the first time
very
you have
terrifying.
children, isn't it? You have just no idea of this. You feel it's just on the bits.
Yeah. Exactly. Knowing how long it had taken me to kind of edit and compile and build the violin twos that we'd recorded, and we obviously were then recording a whole load more of articulations and things. I just suddenly thought, oh my God, can I do this? And the kind of undertaking of it just seemed to be overwhelming.
There's a lot of money back in those days.
Yeah.
Two people who weren't, who
Yeah.
just were desperate for free samples.
Yeah, yeah. It was a big risk. Yeah, I very quickly worked out. Right, okay, I'm going to turn this into my job. Professional sample editor and patch compiler. I viewed it as a kind of war of attrition. So it's just every day take another few steps towards up the mountain, and eventually you'll get there. Yeah, yeah.
But then peer pressure came into play, and it was suddenly, we've got to do the winds, got to do the brass.
Yes.
And then John Power went symphonics.
Symphonic strings, yeah. Yeah, it was very interesting. And then and Hans came on board as well, and so we were getting the amazing feedback as well from people.
Recruited Andy Blaney.
Recruited Andy and Blake.
With the kind of the coding stuff.
Yes.
And Blake we found because he'd written a platform game.
Platform game, In Contact. That was insane. I saw that, and I messaged him and said, "Oh my God, that's amazing!" And then, funnily enough, I'd been introduced to him by a mutual friend in Florida, and so at that stage, I don't think either of us realised that we had actually already met each other, because the year after I graduated from my course in Bournemouth, I went back and gave a talk to the following year. And I remember Andy from then, and I remember him showing me that he was sampling bits off Stravinsky CDs, and slightly, because you had like 4 seconds of sample time in the SO1, but he'd built these tiny patches with just a note, but it was a really good note, and it had, it had something exciting about it, and so he turned that into a playable patch. And I remember thinking, really very clever chap, and writing incredible music.
And for reasons that we've discussed before, there became this kind of commercial necessity, and we came up with the idea for Albion 1, which was successful. And I felt at that point, you felt, okay, I've given enough time as a composer, because you'd really been off the map for nearly 3 years,
Yes. I think the only kind of major job that I did in 2010, which was our third, that was the crossover point of the third year, I think, of Spitfire. I think the only big job I did that year was a pilot to the Fades. Right. And then obviously I did the series the following year. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking, okay, I've kind of got this up and running, and I've kind of worked out it's a manageable thing now. Mm-hmm. What do I do now? What's the kind of next step? And I was really, keen to try and do more film work, because I've been doing kind of, shorts, and obviously doing a lot of TV drama over the previous kind of 10 years.
And some game stuff, Little Big Planet stuff.
Little Big Planet, yeah. So I was doing game stuff, and that was great, because I was getting to write, I was doing all the cinematic stuff, and then, on each game, a few of the adaptive tracks. So it was interesting, because I was learning a new skill, which was how to write good adaptive music. And Kenny at Media Molecule, was absolute, legend. Basically, unloaded all of his the information about how to make this stuff work into my brain, and let me kind of, develop a new skill that way. But the cinematic stuff was just absolutely brilliant, because nothing could be too operatic. You could literally it was like, okay, because of what you're looking at provides the humour. So you could just be as absolutely deadly serious and write,
brilliant, fantastic,
this insane stuff. That was brilliant, and I did quite a few of those games. But I still had that kind of feeling, maybe I should go to the mecca of, film music. And I first met Hans in '99, so when I was doing the film scoring workshop. And so I thought, I had a couple more conversations with him about the possibility of, moving over to LA and kind of dipping my toe in and seeing if there was something useful that I could do to help those guys out, some of his composers at Remote Control. I sat and talked to Hannah, my wife, about it. We had very small children, so it wasn't like a big deal for schooling wise or anything like that at that stage. I'd been recommended a great lawyer to look at the possibility of doing green cards, and so we went for that, and that took about 10 months, I think. And so once we'd got that in place, we said, right, okay, let's go, and we'll just see how it goes and take it one day at a time. That whole process probably took about a year. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, back in Spitfire land, it was just going nuts.
It was Albion 2 was the moment, wasn't it? Because Albion 1 was like, as we said, it was something that we needed to come up with. And then it was great that it was so successful, and that was wonderful. So much so we felt that we should do another one.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, for me anyway, the signifier that something amazing was happening.
Yeah. It was really interesting. It was that kind of Apple moment for us on a very small scale where, when we actually put it on sale, we realised that there was a virtual queue of people around the block waiting to buy it. And so we kind of thought, we've found something that we're actually quite good at here. Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting time because by the time we actually landed in LA, my full intention, I don't think I've ever told Hans this, but was to basically just sit outside remote control and bang on the door until they let me in. But in fact, what happened was by the time we got there, I hit the ground running with one job. I was doing a game. It was another Little Big Planet for a Sony, one of the West Coast Sony companies. And then I very quickly had a TV show and a film that I was working on, which was Half of Yellow Sun, which I was doing with Ben and Ono. And then there was another Little Big Planet game. In amongst all of this sudden, influx of work, we were doing more and more stuff with Spitfire as well. So it was absolutely hell for leather.
But all based in Europe.
But everything in Europe, apart from the odd, bit of Sony, dealing with people on the West Coast, which was great because someone could actually come around. I was flying back to do orchestral sessions and things like that.
There was a crossroads point for Spitfire as well. I think that it wasn't said out loud, but it was like this. I remember saying, I think this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it may mean that our kind of compositional careers not go totally on hold, but become secondary to this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of very quickly realised that I thought that it would be really bad to kind of commit to something, get into something that I was then going to do, half.
Yeah.
Give it half of my attention because I had too many things vying for my attention. So I just kind of thought, do you know what? Spitfire is the thing that I'm going to focus on for the next few years. Aside from the whole Spitfire thing, if I'd been living in LA without any kids, then we would have stayed there longer. We would have just enjoyed the lifestyle. It's a very seductive lifestyle.
So came back to Spitfire, and I think people are more familiar with we've grown the company immensely, and you and I have. It's been an interesting journey, is it? Because I really have to reiterate that you were doing everything, and I was helping with some of the artwork and some of the helping James with the website and stuff like that, and I was writing the user manuals, but slowly, bit by bit, we delegated that away. And
yes.
It's an incredible team now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it built, initially it was quite a slow kind of burn.
Became a parabola, didn't it?
It became a parabola. But I think, we had some really good advice. We were lucky to get a mentor quite early on who is a very successful financial industry person.
I hate speaking for both of us, and correct me if I'm wrong. We did discover that we're not management material.
We did, yeah. We definitely belong in this kind of environment, and not kind of sitting in an office.
So that's when we became kind of founders, which is a much more comfortable position, and that's just us, helping, consulting, but being part of every part of the thing from, you recently dived back in and trimmed some samples and all that kind of stuff.
And it's a time thing, really. I mean, you kind of try and allocate your time and try and do the things that you think are important. And I guess in a way, actually, it's kind of like being a composer. You have a finite amount of time resource, and you have to try and work out where it's best applied. But when I've really enjoyed getting my hands dirty, and kind of doing patch tweaking and stuff, and kind of becoming part of the production team at points, and then stepping out and kind of letting them manage the process much better than I ever could. Because you look at it from both sides. I can say, look, I'm a little bit introverted. I'm a bit of a kind of sitting, with my headphones on, doing that kind of stuff, whether it's making a patch or whether it's, sampling something or trying to play a part on a composition or all that kind of stuff. It's a kind of solitary existence. And I do love working with musicians. So it's not that I hate people and I want to live in a kind of garret somewhere. But I just find that, that kind of management area, I'm no good at it, and I don't want to do it, and because it feels so uncomfortable and alien to me. But it's not just that side of it. It's for the other people who are on the receiving end of that management. They don't want it either. They want somebody who knows what they're doing. Try and get a situation where people are doing something that they're good at, and they're happier, and everyone's happier.
Follow your bliss, they say.
Yeah.
And there's been some blissful moments with Spitfire. At first, the first few NAMMs, I used to turn to you and go, be surprised that stuff that was happening in Spitfire was way more momentous than anything I'd experienced in media film composition.
Yeah.
And we both had the pleasure of being nominated for awards and doing wonderful things, but things being so much more profound with Spitfire. And some of those kind of highlights for you, obviously working with Hans is one.
Yeah, that is the thing. I just kind of had to sometimes just pinch myself and think, these are just amazing life experiences. And it's just been meeting so many people. I mean, there's like, obviously, working with Hans is a massive career highlight, would be for anybody, whatever you're doing, because he's such an incredible artist. But it goes from kind of one end of the spectrum to the other. So there's sitting with my finger hovering in a OB truck, outside broadcast truck, with my finger hovering over the talkback, about to push the talkback to Roger Taylor from Queen for the first time. I'm thinking, oh my God. And actually, with my heart racing, thinking I'm about to give instruction to somebody who is a musical hero of mine, who I was listening to his records when I was 5 years old.
Watching him on Live Aid.
Watching him on Live Aid. And so, and it goes from that to, I once appeared on Top of the Pops, playing keyboards, and the night that we filmed Top of the Pops, I think probably the headline act was BT.
It's not just the people we've collaborated with, it's the people that we know we're part of their workflow. Yes. I mean, that for me was the turning point. I have to say, I think it was the name Willie Snuffy Walden. When he bought Albion 2, was one of the first 15 people who bought that, was clearly queuing outside our virtual shop. And it was like, he was such a part of my early kind of teens and stuff. And I think that's been phenomenal.
I remember actually the PayPal app would come up, would buzz my phone and tell me who'd just bought something. And there were a couple of fantastic, cognitive dissonances then. I remember it popping up and it saying Gary Barlow.
I remember you asking me, do you think it's the Gary Barlow?
I was like that can't be, there must be another Gary Barlow, because that can't be the Gary Barlow. And,
someone you can refer to as a friend now.
Yeah, and just a lovely, lovely guy, and such an immensely talented musician, and just of meeting people like that.
Otto Bahn, that's his fault.
That's his fault. Yeah, I always know that opening an email from Gary is going to cost me money one way or another. It's just amazing to meet such incredible musicians, and people that I would never have come into contact with. I mean, I remember, it was back in LA, sitting in my little converted garage studio, and answering some kind of support questions, and I was answering these questions from this guy Jeffrey, and it was probably about 7 or 8 emails in before I realised that I was talking to J.J. Abrams, and I just thought, oh my God. The one thing that is absolutely evident from all of that is that very few people stumble into success and greatness. There's a ton of hard work that goes into it.
I mean, and even people who stumble in, like I think we've stumbled into this thing.
Yeah.
But by heart, but it's been a long uphill stumble.
It has. Yeah.
But I mean, I think that is the one thing. We've now met hundreds, if not thousands, of music makers. Yeah. And of the very successful ones, or anyone who has any success of any measure, there is literally no exception to hard work.
No.
Absolutely. Talking of hard work, what are your hopes here? I know that you've got a new agent, or an agent that
back to safety, back to familiar,
and so there are hopes compositionally.
Yes, I've just re-signed with Aerodel, so I've been with Aerodel before, and then I've been for a long period without an agent, and it's not been necessary for me to have an agent because I've been working so hard on on Spitfire stuff over the last few years, and then just doing the odd thing that I've picked up along the way. But I actually think, okay, I want to try and be selective and try and do something where I think I'm going to be really good at it, and that's the big difference. That when before. I would literally take anything. Mm-hmm. I would literally take anything, and I would think if I think that I can't do it, I'll just work out how to do it. And I mean, I'm not, that's a great way to learn different styles of music and all of that kind of stuff. But I kind of want to now try and do something exceptionally well compositionally. I'm trying to kind of expand my harmonic language. And that is in a variety of different ways. I'm trying to kind of teach myself, slightly more advanced jazz theory than I currently understand. And I'm trying to learn more from some of my kind of own hero composers of the past. And that'll be people like Herbert Howells, Vaughan Williams, Elgar. There's so much great stuff. I love that kind of that era of music, British music, kind of between the two wars. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be fumbling towards the answer forever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to try and find. There was an amazing interview with John Barry where he talked about when he was in the army. I think he was. I'm not sure whether it was the army or the Air Force, but he was an arranger, mm-hmm. and he studied by mail order with Stan Kenton, I think.
Right.
And one of the things that he used to do was he would pick his starting chord, and then he would play every possible chord change backwards and forwards from there to all of the other keys and chords, and gradually expand it out like that, and so that he could learn. So that when he was actually writing, he could go, I know exactly what I want to do here because it's that change. So.
I would say John Barry is the only film composer who I can usually get within a bar.
Yeah.
It's quite, because he's on like Classic FM a lot.
Yeah.
And you just go, there's something incredible about his language.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely brilliant stuff. And are you going to do any sampling in here?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I haven't kind of started. So a certain amount of this was kind of my design of having done stuff a certain way and knowing what shortcuts are going to be useful to me. But I also had amazing help from Studio Creations. So from Justin and Rob at Studio Creations, who helped me kind of design the way that the patch bay was going to work. And there's always kind of bouncing stuff. I mean, everything is obviously going to be kind of tailored and personalised to the way that you work. So there were some things that they just thought I was mad, and they were like, "Why do you want to wire it up like that?" But I know the standard way, I'm never going to use it like that.
No.
So there were certain things like that. But one thing that I wanted to be able to achieve was to have everything that I might want to grab in the moment of creativity to hand, whether that's quickly sticking an EQ or a channel strip over something, or whether it's grabbing a mic and sticking it on an instrument. I just wanted to be, in that sense, as streamlined as possible.
Right.
So there's a lot of that kind of design that's gone into the way that everything is kind of wired up. I'm still just about learning how everything is going to work.
So I know I've asked so many people this, if there is something that you could go back and say to Paul, the Paul that was maybe treading the pavements in Soho, what would that be?
There are a couple of things. So there's a sounds thing. So I got into a kind of rut for a couple of years of trying to crowbar. I got really heavily into sample CDs.
Right.
I think probably we all did. But I had a pile, when I actually thought I'm just getting rid of all this stuff, I had a massive pile. I've got a photo of it somewhere. Had a massive pile of these CDs on the floor, and I looked at it and I was like, God, what? Why? Because a lot of them, there was some good stuff in there, but a lot of the stuff would kind of entice you into using little chunks or phrases of things, and you'd try and cobble something together around that. And I guess there was a sound rut where I got much too heavily into thinking that that this new sample CD would be the thing that I would write the next piece of music with. And so rather than kind of stepping back, one of the things that, even back to the stuff we first started doing was trying to design effects that were, mod wheel controllable and all that, and different things so that it just wasn't the same sound that you heard again and again and again. And so that I would try and steer myself away from that stuff and say, just do a little bit more paper and pen work. I would tell myself to practice more.
Right.
Because I just wish that I could play. It's like sitting down and looking over Gary's shoulder and just watching him play and just go, I just know that since you were like 9 years old, you've been playing all of the great catalogue of songs forever.
Yeah.
So it's like an encyclopedia of modern music, and just to be able to recall that kind of stuff
Right.
that have that facility. And because of kind of going so heavily into composing, and not continuing to perform, I think that there's a whole area of music that I kind of missed out on, really.
Anything that you would, in today, 2019, people coming out of university, breaking into, about to go to Soho to walk the pavements to get work, is there anything that you identify as a thing, a mistake that people are often making?
Yes. Don't try and sound like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try and sound like everybody else, because that was definitely a mistake that I made. When I knew that I was going on the ASCAP workshop, I thought, right, I'm going to make a CD that I'm going to take with me that has all of my favourite pieces that I've written on there. Pride of place at the very beginning was I scraped together the money to record a 2 or 3 minute orchestral piece that kind of sounded like the kind of the kind of runt offspring of Star Wars and I don't even know what else. I won't besmirch any other piece of music by connecting it to. But I basically was just trying to sound like John Williams, and it was completely pointless. And actually, somebody said to me when they heard it, they were like, "Loved your CD, but that first track, why is that on there? It doesn't, The other stuff is all kind of quite creative.
Yeah.
That's just like a bad John Williams ripoff. So I would definitely say write your own stuff. Don't try and sound like, there is already a John Williams, there's already a Hans Zimmer, and if someone wants John Williams, they're going to hire John Williams. So there's no point being a second-rate John Williams. And learn the technology of the stuff that you've got inside out. So, become as good as you can be on whether it's Logic or Cubase. Pro Tools is always useful to know. Everybody should know Pro Tools because that is what almost every studio in the world records on.
Yeah.
So, knowing this stuff is incredibly useful, because if you do, be prepared, I guess, if you get an opportunity thrust at you, it's really good to be prepared, at least, so you have the technical facility to be able to get to the end of it. I know there's always going to be stuff where you kind of go, well, they want something, I don't know, they want something that sounds like this genre of music that I don't know. But you'll find something interesting by, learning it as fast as you can and coming up with your own twist on it. So I think that there's always an area for being able to kind of sit and work something out on the job. But knowing how the gear works is otherwise you spend half your time reading the manual and trying to work out why you can't get any sound up on a certain channel. It's like, that's not, yeah.
Paul, thank you so much. Congratulations with the studio. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Excellent. Nice one.